Okay, buckle up because we are diving deep into a story with it all. Family drama, tough choices,
Yeah.
ancient history, oh, and a promise that echoes through generations. We're opening up the book of Genesis and following the paths of Abram and Lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. Their story, though thousands of years old, still speaks to these timeless human dilemmas. You know what I mean? Like ambition versus integrity, that kind of thing, or like instant reward versus lasting impact. And we're going to be exploring those moments in their lives where, life throws a curveball and you got to choose.
And let me tell you, these aren't just any old choices. We're talking consequences, and not just for Abram and Lot. Like, this impacts their descendants, too. It really makes you wonder, were Abram's successes just, like, pure luck, or was it his faith? We're going to find out. This time, our sources are straight from the ancient texts, Genesis chapters 13 through 15.
And we'll be your guides as we kind of unpack these chapters, explore what made these guys tick, what led them to make the decisions they did, and how those choices ultimately shapes their legacies.
So picture this, Genesis chapter 13. Abram and his nephew Lot, they're coming back from Egypt. Now these guys are loaded, like swimming in wealth flocks and herds everywhere, practically bursting at the seams. But there's a catch.
Yeah, the land they're in, it just can't handle both their herds. Back then, wealth, livelihood, it all came down to grazing land. Imagine the tension. These relatives who have journeyed together suddenly become rivals. They're facing like a real resource crunch.
Oh, I can practically hear the arguments erupting over watering holes.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's just them out there, right? The text mentions the Canaanites and Perizzites were already living there too. Talk about fierce competition.
Exactly. It's such a good point because it reminds us that like Abram and Lot, they weren't operating in a vacuum. They're navigating a complex world with its own power dynamics, struggles for resources. Sound familiar?
The more things change. So what happens? Do they like draw straws? Wrestle for the best pastures?
Right.
Nope. Abram, in a move that still has scholars scratching their heads, says, "You first, Lot. You choose."
It's incredibly almost naive, right? Here's Abram, the elder, presumably the wiser, and he's handing the reins to his younger nephew.
Right. What's the strategy here? Was this like some ancient power play? What do you think was going on there?
It's a great question, and it's one of the things that makes this story so intriguing. You see, if you look closely, the text suggests that Abram's offer wasn't just about being nice, it was a calculated risk, but rooted in his unwavering faith. And remember, this is a man who believes in a God who has promised him incredible things.
So he's basically saying, look, I trust that whatever choice you make, Lot, God will provide for me.
Exactly, and that trust, that willingness to put faith before immediate gain, it tells you a lot about Abram's character. He's playing a different game here, driven by something bigger than just land or livestock.
Okay, so Lot's got options, big ones. What's it going to be? Team Abram or strike out on his own?
Well, Genesis paints a very enticing picture of the Jordan Valley. It describes it as being like the garden of the Lord, lush, fertile, bursting with potential. Now, put yourself in the sandals of a shepherd back then, seeing this valley for the first time.
Prime real estate.
Right. Talk about tempting.
So Lot, understandably, jumps at the chance. But was this a decision rooted in faith, like Abram's? Or was it something else?
Ooh, good question. And that's what we're going to unpack next as we explore Lot's choice and the fascinating consequences that follow. You're right to point out that difference, Abram's faith versus, Lot's motivations, because that valley may have seemed like the obvious choice at the time, but we're about to see how differently things go for these two.
Right, because Lot's chosen his fertile land, but at what cost? That's what we're going to unpack next as we explore the consequences of his decision. Last time we left our patriarchs parting ways. No more family camping trips for these guys.
Yeah, no more family camping trips. And it gets their paths diverge even more dramatically in chapter 13, verses 14 through 18.
Hit me.
Okay, so no sooner has Lot settled in than God speaks directly to Abram, reiterating and actually expanding on that promise from before. And we're not just talking land anymore, that Jordan Valley is going to look like, small potatoes compared to this. God promises Abram descendants a legacy that's impossible to even fathom at this point.
Hold on. So Lot gets the prime real estate, and Abram gets a divine guarantee of land and a legacy that stretches on for generations.
It does seem a bit lopsided, doesn't it? But this is where we see that central question playing out. Was Abram just lucky, or was his faith the key? Because remember, these men are operating with very different worldviews.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with this.
So Lot's choice, it was all about immediate gratification, the best land, the most obvious signs of prosperity. Abram, however, he's anchored to something much bigger, to this promise that, yeah, he can't see yet, but he trusts completely. And it's that trust that allows him to make decisions that might seem, I don't know, maybe foolish in the short term, but ultimately lead to a much, much greater outcome.
Okay, so this is starting to feel like one of those be careful what you wish for stories, Abram gets this incredible promise, but things start going a bit sideways for Lot, right?
Yes. And in chapter 14, we find out that Lot has set up camp near Sodom.
Ah, Sodom. Not exactly known for strong moral fiber. What was its reputation back then?
Well, let's just say Sodom was like the Las Vegas of the ancient world, a place known for excess. And while we'll call it moral flexibility, even in those days, its wickedness was infamous.
Lot, what are you doing? Okay, so he chooses the prime real estate and ends up Sodom's newest resident. You get to say I told you so, but...
It gets worse. Sodom gets caught in a war, and we're talking a full-blown 4 kings versus 5 kings brawl.
That's a neighborhood watch meeting gone wrong. Poor Lot. Talk about bad luck.
Total disaster. I mean, he gets swept up in this conflict. He's taken captive. He loses his possessions. Talk about a downturn in fortune.
Okay, but I have to ask, was this just a case of wrong place, wrong time for Lot, or was there something else at play? Do you think, his choice led him down this path?
It's the question, isn't it? Because think about Abram's response. He could have easily said, hey, not my problem, but what does he do? He drops everything and he rides to the rescue.
Wow. So Abram risks his own neck to save the nephew, who, let's be honest, kind of created this mess himself. There's a message in there somewhere.
Oh, there is. It highlights, first of all, Abram's loyalty to his family, even when they make, let's just say, questionable choices. But it also reinforces those different decision-making frameworks we were talking about. You see, Abram is proactive. He operates from a place of principle, of faith. Lot is constantly reacting to whatever's happening around him.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. It's like that old saying, you make your bed, you lie in it. But then Abram swoops in with a whole new blanket.
Exactly. And rescuing Lot, it actually has further implications for both of their stories, but more on that later. For now, the question remains, was Abram's success just dumb luck, or was something else at play?
Right. Okay, so we've got family drama, high-stakes choices, ancient warfare, some seriously questionable real estate decisions. What I want to know is, what's the takeaway for those of us who aren't exactly, navigating herds of sheep and warring kings?
And that's where things get really interesting, because while the details might be ancient, the themes at play in Abram and Lot's story, they're as relevant as ever.
Wow, what a story. Abram and Lot talk about a study in contrasts, huh? One driven by faith and a promise he can't even see, the other drawn to the shiniest object no matter the cost. I got to ask, what does all this mean for us, thousands of years later? What can we take away from their choices?
Well, that's the thing about these ancient stories, right? They wrestle with these dilemmas that are still so relevant. I mean, faith, ambition, staying true to yourself when faced with major temptation. It makes you wonder, if we were in Abram's sandals, would we make the same choices?
Okay, yeah, so riddle me this. What wisdom can we actually glean from these guys? Give me the ancient wisdom meets modern life breakdown.
I think it starts with that contrast you just highlighted, Abram's unwavering faith versus Lot's more, shall we say, opportunistic approach.
Yeah, and look, I get it, that Jordan Valley. Sign me up. I mean, instant gratification, it's a powerful thing.
It is. It totally is. And that's a key takeaway right there, recognizing that the most appealing, tempting path, it's not always the most fulfilling, not in the long run. Think about it. Have you ever faced a similar dilemma? Maybe a job that looked amazing on paper, but, there were some red flags, or that shortcut that, maybe it would meant compromising your values a bit.
Ooh, those are relatable struggles.
Yeah.
Ouch, yeah, I've definitely been there. Falling for the quick win, only to realize later, maybe not the best move. So, okay, how do we break that cycle? How do we level up our Abram game?
Well, Abram's story highlights how important it is to have an anchor, right? Something beyond the material stuff that helps you, that guides your choices. For Abram, it was this covenant with God, his faith and a promise, but that's something bigger. It can be, a value you hold dear, a cause, even just a really clear vision of your own future.
So it's like having that internal compass, that North Star that keeps you on track, even when the easier or flashier path is calling your name.
Yes. And remember how we were talking about Abram's trust in God's promise even when things got really tough? That faith, that's what allowed him to make decisions that led to something way bigger. I mean, more than he could imagine.
Which brings us back to that question. Was Abram just crazy lucky, or was there something more to it?
Right. And I think it's safe to say luck might have played a part, but I think it was more than that. It was his willingness to trust in something bigger than himself, to align his choices with a bigger vision that set the stage for everything that followed.
It's kind of inspiring, isn't it? I mean, even thousands of years later, their story can teach us about the power of, faith, intuition, and making those tough choices that actually align with our values.
Absolutely. And, there's one more thing that I think is really powerful about this whole story. Even though Lot, he stumbles, right? He makes choices that lead him into some real messes, but he's not abandoned. Remember, Abram drops everything to go rescue him.
Second chances. It's like, even when we make mistakes, when we stray from the path, there's still a chance to come back, to make a different choice, to find our way back.
Yeah. And that is a message worth holding on to, don't you think? No matter what our choices, there's always that chance to make things right.
I love that. Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into Abram and Lot, I keep thinking about that vivid imagery from Genesis chapter 15. The smoking oven, the flaming torch. Such powerful imagery. What'd you make of that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's about as vivid as it gets, and it's all about that covenant between Abram and God, this visual, tangible symbol of that promise.
It makes you think, what are the Jordan Valleys in our own lives, Those things that seem so great in the moment, but ultimately maybe they're leading us away from our own promised lands for what really matters.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question to leave with. What are we prioritizing? What promises are we holding on to? Those promises to ourselves or to others? And are our choices today leading us closer to those promises, or maybe a little further away?
So much to think about. Huge thanks to you for walking us through this whole thing. It's been incredible. And to all you listeners out there, keep those questions coming. And until next time, happy deep diving.
Welcome to Charlie and Mia's podcast. We're embarking on an exciting journey to read through the entire Bible in just 1 year. Every day, we dive into Scripture, exploring its meanings and how it applies to our lives today. We invite you to join us on this incredible adventure of learning and discovery. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode.